to Maxim now, who we've been speaking to around the last 2 months about tech and how to make tech easy for founders. Morning, Tim.
Good morning.
So I'm going to hand over to you, Maxim. And Maxim very kindly said that if there's any questions or anything you want to know at the end, please raise your hand.
Perfect. Well, I'll kick us off. Give me a second to get the screen share set up. I assume you can all see this. We're good to go. Perfect. So thank you so much for having me. I think a room full of entrepreneurs is always a special space. We're all working hard, creating something out of nothing, which is it's not an easy feat. And so it's always a real privilege and joy to be here. So today I realize it's a lofty title, the Tech Fundamentals for Founders, as if I can give you all of them in 30 minutes. That's, just want to manage expectations. That's probably not the case, but I do think we can get quite far. And before we kick off, I'll just cover a little bit about myself, really. So yes, talking to Ollie and Gary for a couple of weeks or months now, and I have recently started Mennenia. But I've actually spent over 10 years in the tech and startup scene, not unlike some of the people on the call. And I've been a software engineer, I've been a design technologist, a UX designer, and a consultant. And it's quite a funny industry to have rolled into, because when I was young, I was 5 years old and we got our first computer. I was quite fortunate. And I thought, what is this amazing machine? Like, how can I make it do interesting things? And so it was quite strange how I got into all of this, because usually they say, right, girls aren't into STEM, and there's loads of programs trying to get girls into STEM. I think what happened is I just discovered it just before school, so it wasn't quite beaten out of me just yet. And so before you know it, I was kind of on the internet building websites, programming, and all that stuff. Never thought I would actually have it as a career. Loads of different interests, loads of different things I wanted to study. Still ended up studying computer science in the end, because I thought, why not? Interesting degree, and I've got options after. What changed everything for me is that as I joined university, the iPhone came out. And suddenly you could write programs for a tiny device that people could take with them everywhere. And you had a real opportunity to, quite frankly, brighten someone's day by giving them something useful. And to me, that was so much more fascinating than working for years on an Excel type of program and shipping that on a CD once in a blue moon. So I started iOS development in 2009. And when I graduated, kind of just joined the tech startup scene as a whole. Again, much to my, very different to my expectations. And so I was fortunate enough to have been part of some really amazing teams and work on some really great products. One of them is SwiftKey. I was part of the small team that you see in the photo there that did SwiftKey for iOS in 3 months. It was quite a challenging project. And when it launched, we had 1 million downloads on the first day. That was quite a special moment to see that number go there. And have worked at Artsy and then ultimately at ShotGrid, now called ShotGrid, originally Shotgun, which has won Emmys for its contribution to the VFX and games industry. Didn't know software could win Emmys, but there you go. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind and a roller coaster, but I decided to start my own thing because I was talking to a lot of female founders who were having challenges getting technology built. And really, I realized what I wanted to do was empower women founders to confidently create technology for a better world, and really closing that tech literacy gap in business together that I kept seeing. And the reason why is ultimately that, I want a world where innovation is effortlessly created by all the types of people that technology aims to exist for and serve. And so that's quite a mission. I'm not there yet. And where I've started really is with a program, TechLiteracy. So these are the skills and knowledge that you need to launch a product with confidence, on budget, on time, and without any jargon from the industry. So what led me to leave the cushy tech job and go and do this? Well, simply founders kept asking me how to build great products. Maxim, how do you do that? Because every time they tried, especially early stage founders, the result was not quite what they wanted. Engineers wouldn't fully understand the vision, projects would take too long, and they wouldn't always pay the same attention to detail, and ultimately the quality suffered. So add to that the costs that are always rising. I mean, the going rate for freelance iOS developers in 2018 was $850 a day. I know that because myself and my friends were kind of on that. I don't know what it is today, but I know that it's still not quite accessible or affordable to early stage founders. Then of course it's cheaper elsewhere if you outsource in different countries, but it can be almost even more difficult to ensure that you're getting kind of what you want and what you're paying for. And all of this is assuming that you're already building the right product to begin with. Gary and I were just talking earlier, and he said as well, like, you always kind of want to test with something small before. This is a big thing in the startup industry, as I'm sure you're all familiar with. Test small and then scale after. A stat that I always find shocking and fascinating that really grounds me is that 60% of the Google Play Store has never been downloaded, like not even once. Now, of course, there's a lot of rubbish in there, but at the same time, it's a real reality to realize. And so if you're here and you depend on technology in your business, or you're building technology as your business, or you're raising funds, you're hiring developers, but you're still a non-tech founder, I'm really hoping you'll get a lot of value of what we're going to cover today. Because if you're still worried about the colossal cost of technology, the current decline to an extent in VC investment, and you're still really committed to, of course, building and scaling your startup, that is it's a real challenge. And so you're the kind of person, obviously, that wants to build a product effectively and efficiently. But what I've noticed most founders actually admit after a while is that secretly they're terrified of having to deal with the tech side of things. And the reason why is that, most founders don't want to deal with technology. They'll happily outsource it because it's just not familiar. The question then becomes, and quite frankly, the problem then becomes, well, how do you outsource it properly, right? Like, how do you know who to hire if you're avoiding technology? How do you know what good looks like? And how can you instruct your team and work with them to ultimately build what you're looking to build? And this is how you get to those outsourced builds, the failed products, the increased cost of delays, really because critical decisions that you as a founder would typically make with the complete context of the business that you have are made by other people. And so when people ask me the secret, how do you build great products? There are a lot of ways to answer this. Everyone will tell you something else. But one of the things that I tend to say is embrace technology and stop fighting it. And so today I want to show you 3 beliefs that I found that lead founders to typically outsource, some really key decisions, and some quick tips on how to potentially avoid this going into it. So number 1, don't outsource your product decisions. Now, you might think, well, yeah, duh, Maxine. But really what I see is that founders, you think you've got a plan, but your pitch deck is not your product strategy. Right? And I'll say that again. Your pitch deck is not your product strategy. The result of that mistake is that you waste a lot of time and money on miscommunication rather than building a valuable and sellable product. Because the underlying belief is that, well, the pitch deck is the plan, you've put a lot of time and effort into that. And there's almost this expectation, this unspoken expectation of engineers that they're able to interpret that and know what to do with it. But in reality, the pitch deck sells the business, right? To investors, to other people. That's the long-term vision, the plan of how is this business going to win? How is it going to be successful in the long run? The product strategy is actually what creates the product. And typically, founders have this vision. We're vision-oriented. We like to see, the end goal, the big picture. Why else are we doing this? And they hired the developers to build the product simply, right? Because you're not going to write the code, so get an engineer to do it. And then what ends up happening is developers can't build from a vision, and equally, you can't course correct them from the code that they write. Visually, that looks a bit like this, right? You're thinking in this way, they're thinking in that way, and both ways, there's just very little communication going on. The end result being that you're leaving so much room for interpretation because the things haven't been detailed and sketched out, right? Developers are filling in blanks with stuff that you probably don't want, you probably don't need, and ultimately it costs more time and more money. I think of this, it was really funny. I was at my in-laws a couple of weeks ago, actually, and my fiance's mum was like, she's getting some works done on the house. And so she's just had a bathroom done, both of them, and she's trying to get a kitchen done. And she was complaining because, you know, they didn't do what she wanted. They ended up just replacing certain products because some of them weren't in stock. They didn't ask her. And she's like, it wasn't so difficult for them to come and ask me and actually say, well, do you want it on this side of the wall or that side of the wall? They just stuck it there and it's not what I wanted. And I was like, wow, there's so many parallels to development, because there is no blueprint, there's no plan. There's, you know, this is a kind of quick, like, let's redo the bathroom thing. It's not a full house remodel where there is a blueprint and an architect has spent a lot of time placing things very carefully. Instead, people kind of just go with it. And that's a real issue when you're trying to build a product that is ultimately going to be your business, that you're trying to get investors to invest in and take beyond. So at the end of the day, the role of a product owner or a product manager or a product director is to have that clear vision of a product, build a team that can deliver that and keep them focused and aligned, which actually subtly is a bit different from being a founder. Now, typically as a founder, you do take this role on initially. You might keep that role. Very famous founders in the past have done so, like, for example, Steve Jobs. But it does mean that you'll have to consciously balance the business and the vision, which comes, you know, with go-to-market strategy, fundraising, hiring, all of these other responsibilities on your plate, with that kind of product strategy, which includes also a short-term and inadequate version of your vision, the kind of scrappy MVP that you hear about in the industry. I think a really great example of this is a client who started selling via WhatsApp. So she had a, she was trying to create a halal marketplace, like a delivery for halal food. And instead of starting with the tech side of things, because she was like, I don't know about that, she had a WhatsApp group with her community. She connected customers and chefs herself. And then there was a delivery API that she could also use manually. They also had a website as well as an actual API, and would take those orders and make sure that they got delivered and everything in the process. Now, this, of course, isn't the grand vision. This is that inadequate, scrappy initial version, but it's brilliant because A, she started to make money right off the bat, which she could then invest in getting it built. And secondly, she's now thoroughly validated her product strategy and has an idea of what the bare minimum is that's required. And so my question to you really is, how detailed and how validated is your product strategy? And in order to kind of get to that point, there are a couple of things, right? First and foremost, embrace the role of becoming a product manager. What does that entail? What additional skills do you have to stack up on top of the ever-growing mountain of skills that you're trying to acquire as a founder? Or if that's not feasible at the moment, then work with someone closely who can really focus on that role. Now, you can only really truly create a product strategy if you're indeed validating, and validating also means looking at the problem space or kind of why you're doing things and not just how you're doing things, which kind of leads me to mistake number 2, which is don't outsource the validation of your assumptions, right? Because again, founders, they think they've got a plan. And so they're looking to find that developer straight away, right? Oh, this is what I want to build. This is what's going to absolutely change the game. I just need someone to program it. Where are they? Let me go get them. And typically speaking, I hate to be the one breaking it to you, but like typically speaking, founders aren't quite ready for that yet. You're expecting, on top of that, you're expecting something from an engineer that they're not always going to be able to give you, which I'll get to in a minute. And why that's the case is because founders overestimate the value of their IP, or the kind of idea, if you will, before the product market fit actually occurs by over 200%. And that means that typically startups need about 2 to 3 times longer to validate the market than they expect or anticipate. Which means ultimately that, once again, you're wasting a lot of precious time and money, this time on expensive validation through tech that isn't necessarily going to drive growth to the business, and rather than things like, for example, cheap prototyping. The belief that underpins this is that whole idea of A, I know what to build, and B, I'm the one that doesn't know the tech stuff, they know the tech stuff, so if I just tell them this is what we're trying to do, they will go and build it. And as we know, a lot of startups fail, close to 90%. And apparently almost half of that is because they get stuck on the product market fit. And so they focus on how to solve the problem rather than which problem they're solving and why to begin with. Now, there are multiple ways to do that. One of the biggest ones is to get to know your customers deeply and test your assumptions routinely. Then the question I often get is, but Maxine, right? Henry Ford famously said, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, which kind of is exactly my point. They wanted to go faster, right? So I'm not saying go to people and build what they want. Go to people and listen why they want things, what's important to them. And then you can build things efficiently, right? And so when you're hearing, oh, they're looking to go faster, well, a horse can't go any faster than it's going. So what else can I create that allows them to go faster? So don't build a horse. What you end up creating is indeed 100% up to you. And that is the fun part. That's the solution. That's the value prop that you're testing in the market. But don't get someone to, don't pour a lot of money into someone building something that then no one wants. So my question to you then is, have you created at least 4 prototypes for customers to use? And that could be paper prototypes, it could be rough sketches, anything, an artifact to facilitate that conversation with people. I am probably stating the obvious here, but we don't go to customers and say, well, what would you like? Or do you like my idea? Oftentimes you're trying to ask very probing and specific questions. And the easiest way to do that is by showing them what you mean. Again, taking things out of your head, less chance of miscommunication and misunderstanding, having something in front of you and using that as a tool to have that conversation with people to see and probe and learn. An interesting example, and a bit of a shame here, is I was screening candidates for an accelerator a couple of weeks ago, and I was talking to someone, and they were in the States helping marginalized communities get access to Medicaid and healthcare. And they said, listen, we had a huge learning because turns out they don't really want or need apps. They want something really practical. They don't always have the fanciest of phones. And so they just want text messages. That's how we communicate with them instead of push notifications and apps and all of this other stuff. They only found that out after they built the app. So they had to pull that app from the store, which had cost them about $20,000, while the founder was still on food stamps. It's not like they had that money to lose, really, but that's how much they cared about what they were doing, and they utterly believed that was the solution. Now, it's an expensive learning exercise, right? And learning is good. Nothing wrong with that, but how can we minimize that risk? Ultimately, I would say, instead of burning cash, burn prototypes. And then comes the thing where you think, well, but developers know that, right? Like, how am I supposed to know that? Don't they show me how to do this, or don't they tell me how, what to do next? Which is kind of the third area of concern, which is don't outsource the tech decisions to engineers and expect them to know everything. And I've put there blindly because, I want to make it really clear. I'm not expecting you to write any code, right? That would be silly. That's absolutely why you end up having a team of engineers. But just because you don't write code doesn't mean that you're not involved or shouldn't be involved in any of the decisions, and shouldn't demand very clear communication from them in return as to the choices they're making. Because hiring kind of any developer that seems to know what they're doing is a bit of a recipe for disaster. Once again, time and money goes down the drain, this time on non-existing or like throwaway code, rather than building a valuable and sellable product. Because either they're not building anything at all and they're like, yeah, later, or they're building completely the wrong thing. Because developers, they make choices, and you end up getting stuck sometimes, quite often really, with a tech stack that doesn't necessarily serve your needs or your goals, that of your business, and instead actively sets you back from progress. The tech stack is a collection of technology that a business is choosing to use to create a product or their service. So these are your choices of programming languages. What components are you using? If you want to build an app, are you doing both an Android or an iOS app, or only one? Because quite frankly, they're completely different platforms, typically require 2 completely different engineers, unless you start looking at technology that allows you to kind of do both, which now does exist, but trade-offs and decisions, right? And you need to be right there when that happens, because there are so many options. It's a blessing and a curse. We've progressed so much compared to trying to create a tech startup 10, 20, 30 years ago. It's fantastic, but you have to be involved in these decisions, because yes, they know the tech stuff, but that's the belief that will kind of cause the problem. You think they will tell you what to do, right? Because an engineer, they've built products, they know what to do. And it's my idea, tech is tech, a developer is a developer. So there we go. Instead, actually, in reality, there are at least 16 different engineering roles. They all require vastly different skills. And the analogy that there are a couple of analogies that I like to use, but one of them as well is they're like musicians. And a drummer is not a pianist. Now, granted, right, picking someone randomly off the street, a drummer probably knows a thing or two more about music and might learn and be able to pick up piano faster than your random person. But you can't just swap them out for each other right in the middle of a live set. And add on that as well that a jazz drummer has different experience than a rock drummer. You're looking for different things from these people. And so the same holds for engineers. Ultimately, they are builders and they're not architects. We've already kind of looked at that earlier on, but what ends up happening is that they oftentimes don't take the bigger business into consideration and the full context when they are making these technical decisions. So that means that they can end up picking programming languages that hamper you, for example, from hiring a team and scaling when you need to. I have too many stories to even put in slides of founders who've had to start all over again because the work to date was effectively impossible to use by skilled and contemporary engineers. Either they've picked outdated languages, they've picked frameworks that aren't fit for purpose. They, as engineers, we only know what we know. And so we try and make that work for the task that's given to us. My background is I'm an iOS developer. Now, sure, I can pick up some Android engineering. I know a thing or two about APIs and creating a backend. I'm going into some technical bits here, but I'm not going to be able to be a DevOps engineer. I can't build you a whole AWS infrastructure if that's what you're looking for. I can do my best, but it's not going to be great. And so what you end up with is just not fit for purpose most of the time. So really the question there becomes, well, do you have a very clear job description of who you're looking for? And do you have an idea of how to validate their work, even as a non-technical founder? I think there are a couple of things you can do to get that started. First of all, read up on the job descriptions of established startups. See what are those terms and things that keep coming up. Why is everyone talking about React Native? Why is that a thing when people are looking for app developers? I thought, maybe you had a different assumption. What's going on there? Talk to developers and ask them all of those questions. What does that mean? What can it do for us, right? Get them to draw diagrams, get them to explain things. Because, typically we think, well, there's a lot of trust there. You know what you're doing. I don't know, this is not my remit. So I will, I don't want to micromanage you. But this is not micromanagement. This is facilitating an honest conversation. Because there are great product engineers out there that actually are very skilled at doing this, and they can explain decisions, and they can partner with you in creating this kind of stuff. What you probably don't want is an engineer that works on a very big, robust system. So think of your huge IBM or think of the government, and they are working on a very small component of that, making sure it is robust, it doesn't fail, it keeps our traffic lights going, for example, or make sure that we can order coronavirus tests from the NHS's website. Brilliant stuff. We absolutely need those people, but they are probably not your product engineer that is a bit of a jack of all trades and that can have that conversation with you. And one of the easiest ways to start screening that is by actually talking to them and getting them to simplify things for you. Because that sets the tone for working together going forward. Now, it sounds like a lot because that's founder life, right? It's relentless. But at the other hand, you get to be resourceful, and that's kind of the joy in it. As I mentioned, right, you're involved in everything: fundraising, hiring, marketing, sales, and product and technology. It's part of it, right? So when people say to me, how do you build great products? It's embracing technology and no longer fighting it, and simplifying it ultimately so you can work with people and getting it done. Because once you do that, what's left is actually shockingly easy. And I kind of break it down to you need a plan, a team, and a process. And you're saying, Maxine, that's oversimplified. And yes, obviously I have 30 minutes. I can't tell you exactly how to do all those 3 things, but really ultimately that's what it breaks down to. And you don't need to be a tech whiz or have a CTO already to do this. I'm not saying don't hire a CTO, don't try and find one if that's what you need. Just don't wait for one to start doing this kind of stuff. Because at the end of the day, right, it's never done. You need to keep coming back to this and saying to yourself, is it the right plan? Is it the right team? And is it the right process? And with that comes the ultimate founder skill of all, which is patience. Everyone looks like an overnight success, which is rarely the case. And so embrace the scrappy part of things and the learnings that come with it. And don't worry about the unknown. More often than not, it's the worry and the fear of it that causes many more problems than the actual unknown itself. Because once you are honest with yourself and others, and you start asking the questions, you start finding that actually a lot of people are willing to answer it. And then you can get through and you can actually make it to the other side where suddenly you've got a great team and you're building tech. Because I ultimately want you to continue, right? Tech has been very amazing in many ways, right? It brings new revenue or increased revenue from existing streams. If you already have businesses, it can reduce costs and it can really foster great teams and communities. And that isn't just good for business, it's good for everyone. Because quite frankly, I'm really tired of technology failing people collectively. Like, for example, the fact that voice recognition works better for guys than women, or that women in cars have to lower their pitch to have the car understand them or what they're trying to do. Or even worse, Black people being labeled as gorillas by AI, which if that shocks you, it's a true story. From 5 years ago, Google's initial photo recognition algorithm did that. And it sucks, and we are getting better. But this is why I care so much about a world where innovation is effortlessly created by everyone that technology tries to serve. So if that's you, and if you're looking for that, to do that, and you want an extra hand, I'm obviously always honored to help. This is also a brilliant community for those types of questions. If you like to chat about it, you can book some time. But really now, bang on pretty much, we have some time for questions, because if you've got any now, that would be brilliant for me to try and answer for you as well. So Gary, Ollie, thank you so much for having me.
Maxime, that was fantastic. Thank you very, very much. And it's helped me a lot this morning. What I'd like to do is open up to the floor. Is there any questions for Maxime this morning? I'm sure, Gary, you've got 1 or 2 nestling away. Anyone else?
Yeah, I have, Ollie.
Go on, Tim.
Shall I go first?
Yes, you may.
Yeah, well done, Maxine. There's a real dilemma if you're a non-tech person. Do you know the right questions to ask, rather than you don't know the answers, but you sometimes don't even know what the right questions are to ask. Got any thoughts on that?
Yes, because that's exactly it, right? You don't know what you don't know. And I think asking people that exact question is where to start. Because I think most of the time we're thinking, where do we start? This is the question I have. What question is a good question? And so asking that to different people, engineers and so on, or other people who've been there before is the way forward. What I would say is a couple questions. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you're doing? Because it is, I can give you any, but context would be even better.
Well, we've got 2 tech ideas. One of them is to do with blockchain. The other one might be AI. It might be something else. And both are likely to involve a platform.
Brilliant. Okay. And so there are a lot of questions to ask there. For example, what goes into building something like blockchain or AI? And I'll hone in on AI for a second. What leverage does AI give us here? Likely very specific, because you would have thought about the opportunity, but always worth asking. What data do we need in order to make AI succeed? How much of it do we need, and where do we find it? And asking data scientists or AI folk that is likely, it will facilitate a great conversation, because AI is a bit like, I've likened it to tennis, right? So Serena Williams is brilliant. And how many times has she literally hit a ball? When you think about that, right? Not even competed, not even practiced, like every single time her racket hits a ball is a data point. And if you think about how many of them she needed to actually get good, it's quite significant. Another interesting thing about AI is, and I say this just because I had another founder ask me this, she was like, well, someone has this intelligence and I just want to use that intelligence, but for my thing. It's like, well, Serena Williams is not going to walk into the concert hall and start, playing Bach or Mozart or anything like that, because again, she spent every single waking moment hitting tennis, balls with tennis rackets. And you can't suddenly have a brain change to another skill set. And so getting very clear on what data is going to facilitate that amazing brain that's going to win a championship or, put out the best concert ever is a really, really key part in AI. And I think starting there with those types of questions might already be a good place.
Thank you.
Is that okay, Tim?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Hi, Harry. Morning to you.
Hi. Sorry, I'm a few minutes late. I've had the electricity company in for the last 2 days trying to sort out a wiring problem here, but I'm here anyway.
Don't worry. Any other questions, guys, whilst we got Maxim in the room with us this morning?
I don't mind going. I'm sure Lynn's probably got a few questions as well. But
I got lucky to meet Maxim yesterday, and she clarified all of our questions already. So
yeah.
Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, I think it's not so much questions; it's more experience. And by the way, Maxim, as I was going through that has been my whole experience. So if you've not been through this experience before, you just summed it up really well. So a couple of things that I'd highlight back to Halo, because I worked very closely on the product side. So I'll go back to the very beginning, because then it was like when I was learning, but it was times when I'd go in and say, can you do this? And then they would do something and it would break. And I'd go, why did you do that? And they said, because you never told me not to. So you have to be really careful when you articulate to engineers that I think you have to give them, think for yourself. So you have to give them a bit of that, because if you just tell them what to do, it's quite boring for them. A couple of other things is, and I think this is, the terminology fail fast. And I understand fail fast, but I think you have to fail fast, not in when you get to the tech side of it, but pre. So I think what Maxim was talking about earlier, and this would go for Tim and probably Lynn, is operationally do everything you can at first and use the tools that are out there, like texting and Slack and WhatsApp and deliveries or any other service that you can do to prove the model. Because then when you put that to a engineer and you go, well, I use WhatsApp for this, I use Slack for that, I use video for this, and I want to combine it all together, then I think they'll get it a lot more. So I think it's that's one of the things. And sorry, I'm waffling on here because I had a few going back, is I always thought to myself, the first engineer who becomes like common sense, and I know it sounds really bad, but like thinks like a normal person, will be the best engineer in the world. But I think I've got it wrong. I think we both have to move closer together. The engineer doesn't have to be, we have to move more towards them. So I think it's just, when you go speak to these people, is treat them like normal people, which sounds ridiculous, but, and just articulate in the best way that you can. And examples, I mean, you talk about product fit. I virtually do now a presentation just on product, just a few screenshots. This is what I do. This is how I do it. It's not that hard to bullet point your process, and hopefully they'll get it a lot more. So it wasn't a question, it was more just an observation.
Well, I love that, because I think as well, especially what you shared at the end there, is coming closer together. And this is why I'm such a big fan of artifacts, right? Whether that is a prototype, whether that is a sketch, whether that is starting with a pitch deck. It's just the pitch deck won't be everything, but it's definitely a perfect place to start, because you know, ultimately all everyone's trying to do is communicate and try and figure out a way forward. And we have all of these ideas in our head, and unless we put them on paper and can both look at the same thing and say, oh, well, this is what I'm getting from it. Well, I'm expecting this, or well, actually, I was thinking that. You can clear up so much of that misunderstanding, which is actually what's lying or hidden between the cracks that causes those problems down the line. And so I think that's a really great insight and summary.
And so, Max, one more question, because I know Pete wants to go, is having the person actually involved in your company as an engineer yourself, would that make it feel like they've got more choices to do what they want to do than being told? So what I'm saying is if you get that person involved in your company, maybe on an equity front or senior within your team, that it gives them a bit more responsibility, do you think that would make them people a bit more wanting to do it correctly or as best as they could?
Possibly. I think for the right person and the person that typically speaking you need as a founder, yes. But like I mentioned, there are loads of different types of engineers. And what's funny is I actually had the inverse experience. So I'm much more of a producty person, hence I'm doing my own thing now as well. And my friends were all about creating the perfect piece of code to solve that problem. Because ultimately you're given the exact problem, right? Make sure that someone's able to hail a cab. And so you need to know their geolocation and you need to know where they're trying to go. And they're trying to find the most perfect solution to solve that exact thing in code. Whereas I have no interest in that personally. I'm just like, code is code, like whatever, as long as it does the job. But why are we choosing to do that? And so a lot of engineers have slightly different focuses, interests, and goals. And so for some engineers, that might be an absolute dream, that offer that you just said, you know, come and work with me in the company. For other people, it could be their worst nightmare. They're like, just tell me what to do. I want to just fix it and make it exactly perfect. And I think that's another thing, having that conversation with an engineer. What are you looking to get out of this? What works best for you? Because you don't want to fit, what is it, a square peg into a round hole, or whatever the saying is, right? Just because they're extremely skilled doesn't mean that they're the right fit for what you as a business need in that point in time.
Thanks, Maxime. Peter, you're on mute, Peter.
There we go. Yeah, firstly, I'd like to agree with Gary. What Maxime's put across is very good. It's the process that people need to go through, the pitfalls and what have you. I mean, I am an engineer. I was trained as a systems engineer, and I ran a software team many years ago when we only had 64 kilobyte memory with 8-bit Word in a ferrite core memory. So it was quite challenging. But the principles don't change. The same problems occur, whatever size memory and processing power you've got and what the application is and things. But one of the things, and I've also, I work as an engineer, but I also have done sales right the way through the process. So I understand where you're coming from, and you can have lots of different engineers and very ingrained in what they do. It's like doctors, really. You know, you sometimes, I do knees, I don't do anything else. You know, it's that sort of process. So looking at it from a systems engineering point of view, I've always fallen back on 2 documents that really are very simple things in terms of a specification, basically writing down what you want your product to do. So it's clear to people when they read it, and it gives them the opportunity then to ask questions to see whether they understand it or not. Not telling them how to do it, because then you want them, the engineers, to come back and say, well, actually, I'll use this software package, or I'll use that one, and explain to you why they're doing it. The other thing is, an important thing that people forget about is what I call interface control document. And that's really where your product interfaces with other things. A good example is, you work on iPhones. Somebody might go and write a piece of software, but it only works on Androids. You know, that is the interface there. I want my phone to work on, I want my app to work on an iPhone and an Android, or just one or the other. So it's just 2 simple things that, thinking about it from your point of view as the person going out and they're selling your product, what do you want your product to do? What do you want your customers to get from that product? So you can put that in writing so that the guy who's going to write the code can understand it, or come back with questions to you. So I hope that helps.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you very much. I think that's very useful. And we've got, is it Aaron and Sarah?
Yeah, Aaron and Sarah,
yeah. If we could, we've got a question there, please.
No, actually, it's a bit more of a suggestion. So both of us are developers, and you know, we get approached a lot of the time with kind of, you know, people who have ideas and want to do something, and who are non-technical people. And one of the things that I usually say to them, because they always end up outsourcing the development side of things, which, you know, is fine, whatever. But actually, I frequently offer to them and suggest, do you want me to come onto the call with the developers? Because I've heard some stories of, you know, things going not very well, just in terms of, you know, as a developer, I can tell when, you know, the wool is being pulled over your eyes, or if they're charging you, or if they're just, you know, not explaining things properly and that sort of thing. And so I would recommend, if there's like, I don't know, sometimes it's nice to get a second opinion and even have them on that call with you, because they'll be able to understand things and explain it to you maybe better, especially if, you know, the cost of the outsourced developers' time is quite expensive. Then you can ask them and do it a little, you know, take it a little bit slow.
And having technical people explain things to other technical people, I think, is always easier and more transparent than explaining technical things to non-technical people. So, yeah.
I think you make a very good point there, to have that sort of honest broker or interpreter in the middle is something that I would always recommend. Definitely. Wouldn't you agree, Gareth?
Yeah, I think, Maxime, what's your views on this bit that we were talking about?
I think it would be absolutely vital and amazing if you have it. I think a lot of the times the question is, how do you indeed find those people? And I think that's kind of the point of what I've been trying to say so far, is that there is a level of trying to go and understand things and asking those questions. And indeed, it's tricky when you're not a technical person, but that's part of the learning curve, because indeed, this is the best type of person you can work with. Like, from the sounds of it, both of you, right? You understand what someone's trying to achieve. You understand, obviously, what the engineers are saying. You can translate in between. That's something I've always done as well. And that's kind of a product-focused type of engineer, and they're often the types of people that you want to work with. And so knowing that, and knowing that they are available and try and find them, I think is indeed very vital. And I don't know how often you do that, but indeed, if you can ask developers and they're willing to jump on a call and try and help and facilitate or liaise, I think that's amazing.
Actually, I think that's a really good thing for startup to stand up as well, because what we do is we put out there like our Slack channel, etc., and we want to be a place where you can come and ask questions, find the answer to everything. We're probably on that tech front of, like Tim said, how do I speak to someone? Everyone wants to give, don't they, nowadays? We want to give back. We want to help people. So there's loads of people out there to ask. So that should be our approach, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we can put it out on the Slack channel or something, but I'm always happy to jump on a call to help out with that sort of thing. I completely understand what you're saying, Maxim, as well, which is that it's sometimes difficult to find those people. And I'm aware myself, I'm not necessarily the best at speaking to non-technical people all the time, but I do my best. So I definitely think so. I think in group chats, you can find people, especially if it's like a hour-long call. I think it is, the developers, well, some developers at least kind of understand these issues and are happy to help out.
Actually, that's really good, because we could actually start a tech weekly sort of thing where it's an hour question and answer. So that's really good that's come out of this. I suppose the other thing as well is ask questions, because people say words that you don't understand. I was just thinking, I'm from East London. It's like me speaking Cockney rhyming slang and you going, what's apple and pears? Oh, it's apple and stairs. I'm terrible here. But if you don't ask what it is, then you might think it's hairs, not pears, you know? So it's definitely worth asking, and you never feel dumb. I've been in so many meetings where I've put my hand up and said, what is that? And everyone else is asking exactly the same, but they're embarrassed to ask.
Yeah.
Can I
Maxim.
actually jump in there? I would absolutely love a meeting with you, the team from the Name Zero that I'm seeing. And Maxim, thank you so much. I feel like you really helped Lynn and I yesterday as well. Like seeing it's not only us, this is happening to a lot of people, maybe for everybody else to know we have exactly had encountered just most of the tech issues that Maxim was just talking about. And now just having meetings with tech agencies again, and Gary's being a huge help. So it would be amazing to, if you would have time to maybe set up a call, because we do have a CTO that is guiding us and helping us a lot. But I think what we're actually needing is somebody that looks onto kind of the tech menu that we're writing right now, as Maxim said to us yesterday, and actually goes over that and tells us if this is what we need or not.
Yeah, sure. I've stuck my email into the chat.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You or anybody else, feel free to send that on to people as well.
Yeah,
Thank you so kind.
And anyone who wants connections, obviously come through me and Ollie, and we'll introduce everyone as well, especially Maxim, because Maxim, I assume from what your talk is, you are sort of that middle person now, and you're the one who's going to do this. So it sounds like you've got a perfect company starting.
Thank you. Yeah, I do try and help in that, exactly kind of in that space, and translate where feasible. One of the ways I'm doing that now is also I'm partnering with accelerators and so on, because typically, right, early stage founders, it's very hard to get a consultant or someone like that in. I do a bunch of pro bono work, but I also have a limit in unfortunately what I'm able to do and offer in that way. And I notice in accelerators, it's a key piece of curriculum that's missing beyond obviously very key things like fundraising and go-to-market and validation. So currently in chats with Barclays and doing workshops for them in their various cohorts, different universities and different venture firms as well in the US. So that's really, really exciting.
What might be useful if, Gary, you send the invite for Slack to Aaron, Zara and Maxim. So
yeah, I think they've got it already.
You've got the invites, and actually put your tech credentials in Slack and what you're willing to do. That would be very, very useful for our community.
Sure.
Maxim, is that okay, Aaron?
Yeah, sorry, because I was just going to say it's completely true. So our both area of expertise is kind of web-based technologies.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to like blockchain, I'm not the person to ask about, but like AI and web technologies, I can get about on. So I can put in the kind of rough areas that I know a bit about.
Good. Thank you very much, Aaron. Maxim, that's been wonderful this morning. We can't thank you enough, and we're going to circulate the video later today or over the weekend and give you lots of big ups and love on LinkedIn today, because that was very, very good.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me, and also everyone who chimed in and contributed their experiences and thoughts, because like I said, you can't cover it all in 30 minutes, and so everyone's raised some really great stuff. So I hope that's helpful to the community.